Appreciate everyone coming today. We will allow Commissioner Nail to start off and talk to us about the Department of Community Supervision. And we're allocated about 15 minutes because the request is relatively modest. So thank you, sir. Go ahead.
And we'll be brief. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. With me is Matt Ogles, our budget director. And I wanted to extend a compliment to Matt filling in my place when I had to attend the funeral of a former colleague. But Matt did a fine job, and I just wanted to recognize his service in that regard. Dealing with FY 2018 first, what we're talking about is creating a day reporting center in Gwinnett County. We have several day reporting centers throughout the state. Specifically, this will be for $550,000. As you know, day reporting centers are a 6 to 18-month phased program. Some of the cost savings already associated with it have reflected a $1.5 million cost avoidance in the first year. These have 100 participants in them. This site we are slating to put in Gwinnett County. The judiciary is strongly behind us. The county commission is. In fact, they are currently looking for space to provide for a day reporting center. We also know by proven research 24% of those that participate in a day reporting center are less likely to recidivate. There's also 11% are more likely to be employed. Something new that we began in FY 2015 was implement GED labs in those. These have 9 staff at each facility, so your majority of your money goes to personal services, but there are operating expenses such as drug testing, counseling books, telecommunications, and computer equipment. So you'll see on the second page of the presentation, or the third actually, where we have a large footprint of day reporting centers. We currently have a footprint in 114 counties. We have 15 full day reporting centers and 16 day reporting center light programs. One thing I always want to be cognizant of is the fact when I say a DRC light program, that is not a reduced number or a reduced delivery of programming. That is a reduced number of participants in that program. So whereas a full DRC has 100 participants, a light has 50. So once we looked at the numbers, you'll see there a pretty large footprint through the state, and Gwinnett County comprises 8.7% of the state's population. Quite candidly, as we started looking across the state, I was rather surprised that there had never been a day reporting center placed there with the need that they do have. So that's our first request with that one. The second is community coordinator backfill, $388,000 for 5 community coordinators. I wanted to provide an overview, if I could, for the committee of the Georgia Prison Reentry Initiative. This was started about 3 years ago. It was mapped out in 3 phases. Phase 1 started in 2015. There are a total of 16 counties that are in this initiative, and the way that these counties are chosen is simply where these individuals are returning to. So that's where the greatest need is. As we start looking at what comprises the Prison Reentry Initiative, there are key components to it. You have a community coordinator, you have a housing coordinator, and you have a prison in-reach specialist in each one of these areas identified. Mr. Chairman, I want to share with you, I take the responsibility, I know for about 3 weeks, asking for specific information as it relates to employment. First of all, I think I misinterpreted what you were asking for. And then the second, once we finally realized the granular level you're looking for, I will tell you we do not track at that level. But I will share with you
just so let me back up for the committee and the people that are here in the audience and watching. So what we were asking for before in previous meetings and then in the the 17 budget, we were asking about what information can be provided as to the success of finding employment for those that are under community supervision and moving through the day reporting centers, and the work of the 5 community coordinators, because these were federally funded through grant money, and now they're rolling off the federal grant funds, and so we're now making those permanent state positions.
Correct.
And so my question was, I wanted to see what the proof in the pudding is. What are the taxpayers gaining by allocating almost $400,000 for these coordinator positions? Right. And I know that historically what this has done has been to create that synergy between the coordinators and the marketplace, so that there's a way to help putting those folks into jobs or into educational opportunities. And so I was trying to get more details about the follow-up. Yes, sir.
And your question was a very, very good one. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you want to see if you're getting a cost-benefit analysis. So there's 2 things here. There's the referral process, and then there's the building of capacity. So when the Prison Reentry Initiative was started, to each one of these counties, we went and we did a gap analysis. We wanted to look at what needs they had, what services were available, and where there were not services to meet those needs, to fill in the gap and get those established. So when we talk about the work that has been done here, this is just a representative sample of when you talk about linkage for employment services. Those are offenders. Now keep in mind, with Prison Reentry Initiative, these are high-risk, high-need offenders. These are the ones that we really should be spending the majority of our time on. So these are the ones that have difficulty in getting a job. These are the ones that have difficulty in completing their education, of staying clear of substance abuse. These are the ones that have a difficulty of complying with their mental health treatment. So these are high-risk, high-need individuals. So we broke it down and we looked just amongst referrals. And keep in mind, while it indicates all 3 phases, you're really getting a 1-year total from phase 1 and a partial year total of phase 2. It's not indicative of all those phases. Linkage for employment services was about 394, and then direct employer was 194, and then other services, whether it be housing, mental health, cognitive, those referrals were made. Then you also have the provider part of it.
Mr. Commissioner, I mean, just so we can get the definitions right, can you explain to us what linkage means?
Yes, sir.
In real terms? Is that a job or is that just a connection?
This is a connection, but it's a connection that is specifically beneficial to the offender as well as to the employer. For instance, if you had a welding company that was looking for welders and you had somebody who is certified in welding in Department of Corrections, they would make a direct linkage to that employer based on that skill set. So really a warm handoff, if you will. When you look at service providers, these are where we go in and we look at the gap analysis and see what is needed there. For instance, housing providers. 571 new housing providers, 161 new employers, and then 75 in regards to other services. It's very difficult to pinpoint the precise location. For instance, employment may be good down in Thomaston, but they may have an underserved population for substance abuse. It could be just the opposite up in Hartwell or Henry County. So that's why that gap analysis is done for that purpose, is to look at the need. So it's not generic across the board. Some places don't really have a need for housing. For instance, in Fulton County, it has an abundance of housing, if you will. So we have to put time and energy towards different areas in that regard. Now, here's the good news. While we talk about reducing recidivism, we know that that is measured 3 years after completion of a case, okay? So it's very difficult to say in a year's time. Matter of fact, if somebody would say, yes, in a year we've reduced recidivism, I would argue that, because that's not what research says it's measured on. What I would say research is measured on, you look at substance abuse, education, employment, and cognitive and mental health abilities. If you have improvement in those areas, there is a far greater likelihood that recidivism will be reduced. What we have found in tracking this with applied research services, what it is showing now, and these are early indicators, is that the dial is starting to turn where we are showing greater success and improvement in those areas amongst this PRI population. And I can't help but to think that is because they have a concentration of services through these community coordinators, housing coordinators, and prison in-reach specialists. So I just wanted, and I appreciate the committee indulging me because we've talked about prison reentry initiative for a long time, 3 years, but I just wanted to make sure that we all had an understanding of what we're talking about going forward.
So the data that I'm looking for is on, for example, your linkage for employment services at 394. So the question that I'm asking is out of the 394, how many have actually gained an employable job? So that's the kind of information that I think we want to see, and because I think that'll show us some trends.
I think you're right.
Success with the coordinators, how well they're doing. If they're gaining more and more employment for those coming out and re-entering, then I think we should hopefully see that trend going up because they're developing more relationships, better relationships in the various areas around the state where they could be employed. And I would hope to see over time we see that number go up.
You're right, Mr. Chairman, and I cannot disagree with you, nor can I make something exist that just isn't there. And at the onset of this program, that is something that was not tracked. We are very, very aware of it, and that is something we do need to dive into. We run a cohort of PRI and a cohort that is not PRI and do a comparative analysis in those categories, not as granular as you're talking about. But I think your point is well made and well taken, and that is something we were working on to start tracking. Originally, it just was not set up that way 3 years ago. And I can't explain why, nor do I think it would be appropriate for me to second guess why it wasn't set up that way.
Is that something that as commissioner, can you work that into your analysis so that we can track that and have an information so that when we come back for the amended budget or between now and then, we can start to get some baseline numbers?
We can, and we have already begun that process, sir.
Okay, great.
Based on your initial question 3 weeks ago.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. All right. Let me let you roll right on here. I've kind of cut in,
okay.
Eating up some of your time.
The third area is a 20% pay increase. I testified last week that being in this field for 28 years, I can tell you matter-of-factly, this 20% pay increase was the biggest morale booster I have ever seen amongst community supervision officers and former probation and parole officers. It's absolutely incredible. But what it really means for us, we went back and looked since August. Our resignations have been reduced by 50%. And the only thing that I can have as an indicator of why that is the case is the pay raise that was implemented. Yes, sir, that. In addition, I can't begin to tell you the importance of it. It has been absolutely incredible. And truthfully, it's nothing that these officers were given. They have worked long and hard for it, and they have an extremely difficult job, especially in this day and time. But I think it's going to help us tremendously with our retention, but I believe it's also going to help us tremendously with our recruitment. So it has had a wonderful, wonderful effect. Finally is the bond request, major maintenance and repair of $335,000. When we inherited 10 state-owned properties from Department of Corrections, and some were in, I won't say disrepair, but certainly need of repair from major initiatives like HVAC systems, sewage systems, and a sundry of areas. So roofing, so this was to help with that allocation. We'll say in FY 2017, we were appropriated $580,000 for those major maintenance and repair. And this year we're asking for $335,000 to continue with that effort.
Great, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I appreciate that information. And then we also noted Courtney was going through and working, I think, with Matt on an item that there were 4 eligible positions in a DRC that was not planned in. I think with the Gwinnett DRC that was not planned in. So there will be an adjustment of about $53,254 is also I think, needed in order to make sure that they get their 20% increase, but that was not planned in when the initial budget submittals were made to OPB prior to the governor's announcement. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing that up. That is correct.
Okay, let me get some questions. Al, Representative Williams can be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, Mr. Commissioner, good to see you.
Likewise.
When you were talking about the phases, the three-phase rollout, you gave us the 3-year on phase 1, the 2-year phase 2, and your measurements, and phase 3. How long? What is the time frame on phase 3?
Phase 3 really just got underway probably about 6 months ago, where we started moving forward with the hiring. So we are already what I would call grounded in those areas. So I would look at about 6 months to a year, start having direct performance measurements as it relates to phase 3, and that will in fact be about the 3rd year of the project.
One follow-up question. With phase 3, and particularly in Liberty County, that was a judicial circuit. There's 6 counties in the Atlantic Judicial Circuit. My question is, with that much geography and with 6 counties, that program has a coordinator and 2 part-timers. And they're beginning to stand up the other counties. How throughout the state, that's quite a stretch of manpower there.
It is a stretch, and one of our challenges. Transportation is always a challenge with it. We look at, there are very few what I would call single county circuits. You look at Okmulgee Circuit has 8 counties. You look at Griffin Circuit, you're talking about 4 counties. So there are multi-county circuits, and primarily the focus at this time will be in the center of those circuits, with really looking on a case-by-case basis, how do you reach beyond those circuits, or I'm sorry, beyond those counties? Because as you start looking on the outer edges, you have fewer cases. So you have to be cognizant and make sure you're not taking away, for lack of a better phrase, your bang for your buck. And just to be quite candid with you, I don't think anyone has worked through that yet. That continues to be a challenge for us to face.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. And Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm glad Chairman Powell is also with us as he carried the bill that created the Department of Community Supervision. I believe I'm the only member of Judicial Non-Civil that heard the bill. Now, whenever we were hearing the bill, we heard a lot about efficiencies. There were 3 officers that were going to the same household. It'll be 1 officer, 1 household. Administrative efficiencies, we're going to whittle down, we're going to do, we're going to have all these efficiencies, and we're going to be a smaller, leaner. And I haven't seen that in our budget. I haven't seen that. And I was wondering, kind of from a policy perspective or from a leadership perspective, what exactly you're doing at the department to kind of move towards that.
Very, very fair question, and I'll tell you, our first year, keep in mind the employees, even though DCS was created, they still were working for the respective agencies, okay? But one thing I want to make clear is efficiencies and effectiveness doesn't always mean cost savings, okay? Efficiencies and effectiveness means perhaps supervising a case at a greater supervision level than you would have been able to do so beforehand. I can tell you matter of factly, if the 2 agencies were not combined to complete and form DCS, if I was over probation or if I was still over at parole this budget year, I would be asking for a minimum of 100 officers. So I don't think it's so much about what is being saved. I think it is also what we are doing to prevent us from coming to the table and asking for more. Georgia leads the nation in the highest number of probationers. We have about 160,000 probationers, over 20,000 parolees. That is the highest in the nation. We also lead the nation in the longest sentence given out for probation, which means there's a stacking effect. So what I can tell you is the creation of DCS has prevented probation or parole coming to the legislature and saying, we need more officers.
So you're not doing anything to try to create more efficiencies?
I'm doing
and the whole 3 officers, 1 household, 1 officer, 1 household.
Absolutely. We're doing a great deal, and I'll share with you what we're doing. When we focus our resources on these high-risk offenders, we have the opportunity to see these offenders more. So the resources and to supervise them more, have initiatives like PRI where we're all on the same sheet of music. Those are the things that we're doing so we can have a far greater completion rate for our offenders and send fewer back to prison. To me, that's public safety, whether it be cost savings or good public policy, and that is what we're working day in and day out to do.
So I think by analogy, then what we saw with the criminal justice reform as it pertained to the Department of Corrections and prison systems, we saw a trajectory coming in 2011 that was looking at populations exceeding in 65,000. And then what we have seen is that it's now flattened out to about 56,000, somewhere right in those numbers. And what we've seen is a flat line. Mm-hmm. So the efficiencies are relative to what your projected expenditures and employment requirements would have been as of that time, the trajectory that we were on pre-criminal justice, criminal justice reform, as opposed to currently. And so I think some of that is contained within, and the public's not really aware of it, in the sense that what we have been able to do is in streamlining these agencies and implementing that reform, you have flattened out what was a very high, steep trajectory in terms of cost expenditures to the taxpayers. So I think that there's that part of it, and that sometimes gets lost in the messaging. And so I just wanted to raise that as a possible explanation for what I'm hearing you say.
It is, absolutely. Again, it's not just about dollars. Let me give you an example of when that prison flatlined, okay, when it was on an uphill trajectory and it flatlined, those cases didn't go away, mm-hmm. Okay? Where they came was to community supervision. That's where they came to. So our caseload blossomed, thank gosh for accountability courts. But even with accountability courts, we have 76 full-time staff and officers devoted to accountability courts. So with those shifting of resources, if DCS would not have been created, I guarantee you would come back, you'd have one of two things. You'd have to hire more officers to do an adequate job, or you would not be able to do an adequate job. What we are doing is not hiring officers and doing a very adequate job. And I would say and argue an even better job. So we are gaining efficiencies. Just the mathematical equation of sending one person into one home, also collaborative efforts with DFACS, collaborative efforts with DBHD where that wasn't taking place before. I don't think putting a dollar sign to that versus ensuring that cases are being supervised better and there's more of a holistic approach in that home. I'm not so sure you can put a dollar sign on that, but I know it's taking place.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation from the committee. And any other questions from members? I did want to thank you very much, Commissioner, for being here.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
going to wrap that up so we can move on to the next program, which will be the Georgia Commission on Family Violence. We have a few questions for Ms. Jennifer Thomas. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you,
appreciate it. Matt, thank you so much for being here today. I did want to recognize our Vice Chairman of Appropriations, Representative John Carson, is here with us today. So he's joining us ex officio with our committee meeting. I'm not sure what that means for me. I must be in trouble. There you go. Well, I'm not sure if I brought the right drill bit today. So, we want to move forward with this. So if we'll go ahead with Jennifer Thomas, Executive Director. We're happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. And if you could go ahead and give us a brief summary. We're running a little bit behind, but we'll manage that myself.
I'll make it brief, Chairman. Thank you. This is my first time being before this committee, so I appreciate your time and seeing me today. I prepared longer remarks, but I'll email those out to you after. I'll just cut right to the chase here. The commission is responsible for developing standards for Department of Community Supervision to certify and monitor the family violence intervention programs that are currently in operation across our state to provide services for individuals that have committed family violence offenses. Currently, there are 109 certified programs in Georgia. In 2016, we certified 5 new programs and recertified 45 programs. We also conducted 28 site visits in 2016 for these programs. We are requesting $133,000 for FY18. We will remit all of our family violence intervention program fees that are collected to us to the state treasury. If we receive this funding, it will allow us to hire a full-time FIP compliance coordinator to ensure that all the certified programs are operating within the standards. So by remitting these collections to the Treasury and obtaining the $133,000 in state appropriation, this will actually, for us, create budget stability and will allow us to work a bit more closely with local resources to create new programs in underserved areas. Collections of fees are expected to increase in future years, as they often do, and so that means more offenders will be paying in their fees. So the code section, you had asked questions earlier, and I wanted to address the questions that you had, Chairman. Code section 191311 grants the authority and ability to be able to collect these fees. And by fees, the fees are that each individual that attends a family violence intervention program remits $20 to the Commission on Family Violence. So each participant pays $20 to join these classes. And then each program that I referred to, the 109 programs that are currently certified, to be a new program, they have to pay $150 for a certification, and then they have to pay biannually another $150 for recertification. So the programs are paying to be able to provide these services. So when the commission was, with the creation of DCS, we were moved into this new department when the DCS was created. And it was at that time that we interpreted the language that we should be and we will be remitting the fees that we collect to the state treasury and would prefer to move forward in that direction.
How much fees, last year, what were the total fees collected?
Yeah. Last year's, excuse me? 101,000.
And just correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say is that you will remit them going forward, but have not been remitting them in the past. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Matt, is there any other fees we need to know about? This
is the only one.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out. Sorry, Mr.
Chairman
Chairman.
Ballinger, go ahead.
I do apologize. I just wanted to interject that the Commission on Family Violence has recently moved from the judiciary to the executive branch. So I think that has resulted in some different handling of how those fees were done. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. All right, so then within the funds, then, Mr. Ogle, why wouldn't we just do use existing funds for the 101 and then add to it 32,000?
If we remit all of the funds to the treasury, then we wouldn't have the base 100.
Okay. All right, so we'll add, total, it would be just one, and then we'll be adding 32 to it from general fund.
Essentially, based on the projections that we have by FY18, we think it'll be $133,000 that we will remit to Treasury.
Okay, so you're anticipating
Yes, sir.
that the fees will ultimately cover this new position.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about this is could you break down the position salary benefits so that we understand that and what the staffing level is?
Sure. The salary, the base salary for that individual will be at $40,000. And then if we were to add fringe benefits, I think we did the math on that earlier, it's about $67,000.
Okay, and the rest of that is that supplies or?
Well, it's actually we currently have a staff person that's a certification coordinator, and if we were to remit all of those fees, then we wouldn't be able to cover that salary. So this would create an additional one position.
So the funding is actually going to be used to take care of an existing position.
Yes, sir.
Partially fund an existing position.
Yes, sir.
As well as fund a new position.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. Other questions from the members of the committee? All right. Thank you. Let me follow up. I do want to just make sure we can get some answers from you via email. But could you explain, just explain for us, when you say maintain the current efforts for the addressing family violence in Georgia, I'd like a little bit more information just about that. You can send that to Courtney, and we'll circulate that.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you,
Yep.
Madam Director. I appreciate you being here. With that, we're going to move on to our Public Defenders Council, and so we're looking for Executive Director Tyson and Ms. Rayford, Budget Director, if she's here. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for coming. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Director. You can take it from here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm joined today by Terry Rayford, our Budget Director, along with our Deputy Director, Jiminique Rogers, and our External Affairs Director, Cheryl Karunas. Remember, just a brief reminder, as the Public Defenders, we're the red team that consists of over 800 employees and 200 contractors who work every day to ensure that we can have confidence in the outcomes that our justice system delivers by testing the state's theory and ensuring that all the facts are there and all the right principles are in place. When I chose that analogy, I didn't realize what the makeup of the Super Bowl would be, but having the red versus the blue team may lead to other conclusions at this point that may be favorable to public defenders. But as we've discussed, the major goals for us as an agency really is getting to full funding from state funds for our statutory mission. And right now we are about $6 million short of being fully funded for our statutory mission out of state funds. And the $3 million that you see that's listed there, we've discussed this extensively, I know with the amended, is now in the big budget as well. That gets us halfway there as far as full funding goes, and that's an exciting step for us as an agency. With that, we'll be off of emergency funds completely. The remaining $3 million consists of $1.5 million that is from county administrative fee revenue. We charge a small fee to counties to handle the HR and some other functions that we provide for them, and then use that revenue right now for operations, for our training, and for expert fees. That fund is supposed to be used for our cushion for conflict spending, but we're not able to use it for that purpose right now because it's necessary for our operations. The other piece of the underfunding for us is it's been part of our statutory mission from the beginning to handle juvenile delinquency actions in juvenile court. Last year, we're incredibly grateful. We got our first 15 positions from this committee and the governor for juvenile defenders across the state. And we allocated those where the need was the greatest. In contrast, the prosecution has gotten 47 positions over the last 3 years to handle juvenile and accountability courts as well. So for us, although we've gotten the first 15 and that was a great step, we still rely on our county partners for the remaining 28 positions and remaining 28 circuits. And so once we get to a point where we get all state funds for that, we'll be able to be fully funded for our statutory mission there. Another issue I know, Mr. Chairman, you had asked about related to step increases, and we've been working based on last year to have parity between assistant public defenders and assistant district attorneys. A salary schedule is an incredibly useful tool for us as far as recruitment and retention goes. If we can offer lawyers some certainty of a salary increase, even a small one over time, and let them know that, that's a good tool for us to help keep good people with us as an agency. Last year, our turnover rate among lawyers was about 25%. And even though some of those lawyers might be moving to a different office within the agency, there's still a disrupting value that happens for clients who are incarcerated, who are in jail, who now have to get to know a new lawyer. Now lawyers have to get to know a new case. There's a delay that can enter into the overall justice system as a result of that turnover. So limiting that's very important. We want to try to stay as much as we possibly can on track with the prosecution from a salary perspective. Another element that's critical is annualizing some of the positions from last year. I know last year we phased in the 15 juvenile positions, and then several of the, I think the 15 juvenile positions is the one that we phased in began in October 1st, and so we'll need to annualize those as well as we go into the FY18 budget along the way. Oh, and I'm sorry, and Ms. Rafer's reminded me a Clayton County position as well from a new judge as well on that. I'll also talk about the accountability court supplements that are listed there. I don't believe there are accountability courts stood up right now in Lookout Mountain or Oconee. We had to submit our list sufficiently early, but obviously whichever are the certified accountability courts from the Council of Accountability Court Judges will be the ones we want to use for that to ensure those supplements happen in the right places. And then the last item there is a 3-year project to electronically store case files at circuit offices. We have, as a law firm of perpetual duration, a long-term problem that will ultimately begin affecting the agency in a number of years as we move forward. And that is that because we serve our clients and we continue to exist, eventually the person who's a client today may become a victim tomorrow, may become a witness the day after that. And as we hold confidential information about these clients, that will drive us at increasing our conflict rate because we have a duty of care to former clients, even if their cases are closed. So part of our long-term project, we've been working on developing a system whereby we can scan old case files, eliminate the cost of paper storage, but primarily be able to restrict access to those case files and eliminate those conflicts going forward. Each percentage increase in the conflict rate for us as an agency is about an $800,000 to $900,000 expense, depending on where it occurs. And for us, we want to try to hold that number down over time and ensure that that's not going to rise due to former client conflicts as the agency continues to grow. So that's our request for the FY18 budget.
A couple of questions that I have, and then members of the committee I know have questions as well. The request that's on the first request you have there, it's line 37.2.5 in our track sheet, but it's dealing with the geographical coverage and the capacity for conflict cases. That is filling in the gap that you're spending out of your reserve funds. My understanding, Mr. Executive Director, is that this is supposed to be the final year you're requesting that money, so we should not see that line item again. Is that correct? That's
correct. It should be going into our budget base, okay, and should continue. We should not have to see it again. And the only reason why you're seeing it again this year after seeing it last year was because we wanted to make sure we had the right data point, wanted one more year of a complete budget year to make sure that $3 million was the right number. We have been relying on that from emergency funds as part of our budget base, and we'll get that gap filled, and you won't see this item again.
And if I heard you correctly earlier, you said that about $1.5 million is what you've been supplementing of that from your administrative fees that you're charging counties for HR services, and you're using some of this, also the administrative fees, to pay for training.
That's correct.
So then my question then is, if we're going to supplement with training, then does the $3 million need to be reduced a commensurate amount to offset the training allotments?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's two distinct pots that are at issue. The $3 million standing alone relates just to emergency funds. In addition to $3 million, we're having $1.5 million that we're allocating for training and experts in those other functions. So any money that we allocate towards training will start freeing up the administrative fee revenue for us. And one of the long-term challenges we face is the administrative fee is an uncertain amount of money that's coming in. We have a general amount of certainty to it, but it's starting to go down and continues to, just because a lot of counties look at the cost of state health benefits and say they'd rather make somebody a county employee instead of a state employee. And so this is declining revenue over time. So that's part of why we want to get off that funding long term.
And I want to come back to the way that you're evaluating, monitoring the work that you're getting from your contract attorneys, the conflict attorneys, because they're outside counsel. Essentially, you're hiring contract attorneys to do the jobs. But jumping down to the other request, which was for the increase in accountability courts, the request has $39,099, but there are two circuits that have yet to have a certified accountability court. It's been the practice of this committee not to budget for those until they have been certified, make sure they have some skin in the game locally, that they're really setting these things up. And those are Oconee and Lookout Mountain. So there's $12,000 that seems to me to be included in the request, and that the committee should examine. But in addition, there's in my mind, a discrepancy, because I think what was submitted to OPB was an amount of $24,000, and yet the amount that's being requested is $39,000. So if I'm looking at fiscal year 18 budget, I have what I have in my information is that South Georgia was 6,000, Tifton 6,000, Oconee, Lookout Mountain were both 6,000 for a total of 24,000. And then and then the request is for $39.99. So I first want to know why there's a difference between those those numbers, and then secondarily, your thoughts or comments on possibly eliminating the 6,000 for Oconee and Lookout Mountain until those are actually stood up and operating. Maybe look at those at the amended budget.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So on an initial matter, the certification issue I know is very important to this committee. And like I said, we were trying to predict when the certification would happen. I definitely understand that it hasn't happened for those. And I definitely want the committee to put just the ones that you want to have as the certified accountability courts in there. So that makes perfect sense. I know Lookout Mountain has meetings this week, but they're not at the certification stage yet.
Yes.
As to the dollar difference, I'm going to ask Ms. Rayford to explain the difference here, because she's handed me a number, and it has to do with the amended versus the FY18 of that discrepancy.
Okay.
I think that when we had discussions with OPB, they were including 17 and 18 together, and that was where the 39 came from. It was just through discussions with OPB, and that's the number they put in the budget.
Okay, but the actual need, though, it would be just for the two,
just the six,
South Georgia and
yeah.
Tifton, so it's $12,000.
$12,000.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then also, and I appreciate Courtney. She was digging, and we went over that this morning. So I appreciate her work on that. The other is, you have been very good in presenting to this committee priorities for your agency. And sometimes those priorities don't necessarily match up with what we get as a proposed budget. So I know that in line 37.2.7, there's $1.2 million that's been set up for it's the first phase, I think, in the 3-year phase of the electronically stored case studies, case files for the circuit offices. But you've also argued and requested that we look at training being one of your top priorities to try to make sure you have ongoing training funds. And then obviously the step parities are important as well, to make sure that you're maintaining parity in terms of your salaries with the ADAs. And so in the sense that we're trying to provide an equitable venue of justice, that you're not having folks migrating between prosecuting and defense counsel, and that you can maintain a team. Using the Falcons analogy, you don't want folks drafting mid-season out of your team. You lose the cohesiveness. So that has been somewhat of a priority in this committee, to try to make sure there's been a balance there and that there's been treated fairly and equitably. So with that said, so can you comment, please, on the necessity and the prioritization of the $1.2 million request that's in the budget versus other requests that you have made to the committee?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. And again, as an executive branch official, we are very appreciative of the governor's recommendation and recognize that he has the interest of the entire state he's trying to account for as he prepares the budget. As I've discussed with this committee here even today, the long-term need there is a long-term need for our agency on the scanning project. The more immediate goal for us as an agency is moving off of these other uncertain sources of revenue and getting fully funded on state funds for our statutory mission. So anything that we're able to do to offset the administrative fee cost, it frees up resources within the agency to help us work on other projects, or to surplus back to the state any remaining amount that's there. So as a matter of priority, obviously us keeping pace and quality with the prosecution is important. And I want to say how grateful I am for this committee and the commitment on that point. It's been a very inspiring thing for our agency to see and recognize that the individuals who work in it are valued and are understood to be valued, and people are very grateful that the committee recognizes that and that the legislature sees that. So for us, I would say, Mr. Chairman, that the number one priority for us as an agency is moving off of those alternative revenue sources and being fully funded for our statutory mission.
Okay, and Chairman Ballinger has a question, so I want to let her ask the question. But before that, I want to ask the question, and you can answer it by communication with email. But I'd like to know more about the training that you're proposing. Specifically, I'm looking at how many days of training, the location of the training, I want to break this down a little bit more in detail because I'm not really certain that the numbers are consistent. So I really want to see what the training that's going to be provided, how it's going to be provided, are there efficiencies and provisions of it? Because the number that I'm seeing is similar to what I think PAC is traditionally getting, but yet there are more attorneys that PAC has to administer. So if we're going to talk about equity, we need to think about that in terms of the number of people that you're going to train.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
So I think I want to see those numbers before we make a final decision on that. Chairman Ballinger.
I likewise had a question about the training, just specifically because, I know the bar has, continuing ed all the time, on how to get off your DUI, how to get, effective cross-examination from the defense bar perspective. ICLA and a lot of those organizations seem like they offer a lot of that, and whereas, the prosecuting attorneys don't, the bar doesn't offer that. It's left up to PAC to do that sort of thing. So I was wondering, kind of following along with Chairman Welch's comment about how you would kind of, there isn't the necessity of creating kind of wholesale. Would you just be sending them to ICLA classes, or, how exactly would that work? And also I had a question about, whenever you mentioned the steps, I know there was a situation in, I believe it was the Appalachian Circuit. It was one of our surrounding circuits in Cherokee County, obviously not in Cherokee County, but where public defenders were actually, people were leaving the prosecutor's office because they could make more as a public defender because you had a little bit more flexibility with regards to how they brought in as far as steps and that sort of thing. So I wanted to, just kind of wanted to get your comments on that because, the public defender's office was paying considerably more, so people were actually leaving the prosecutor's office and going over to the PD's office. So now you make this statement, we're just trying to keep up with prosecutors. It's like, that doesn't make sense. That's kind of an incongruous statement. So if you could just comment on that, I would appreciate it.
Certainly, Madam Chair. And I'll explain first the difference on the salary things, and it had to do with partially with our implementation of the salary steps. And so when the agency first began, there was a lot of ideas that there was going to be plenty of money for a long time, and so a lot of very high salaries were paid to people at the outset of the agency. When the economic downturn happened and the agency's budget was reduced, there was a downward pressure on salaries. And because there was no salary schedule across the state, offices that had turnover had salaries decrease from $60,000, $65,000 a year, whatever the CPD was able to negotiate with the director at the beginning of the agency. Saw those numbers push down to the 39, 41 in that range. And so we had a massive disparity across the state based on the amount of turnover during the economic downturn. So we had some offices, like the office you referenced, where there was some more money available and the CPD historically had discretion of how to allocate that among employees. And that led to some situations where there was an opportunity to go to the PD's office and make more money. In the vast majority of our offices that had turnover, just because our turnover was high throughout the downturn, we had a situation where the wages had become significantly under what the prosecution had. So in a goal to try to equalize all of that, our salary schedule brought people who were below up, froze everybody at a higher level. And so our idea is we're going to try to bring, pardon me, towards parity with all across within our offices across the state, in addition to with the prosecution going forward. And now if anyone leaves and wants to do a new hire, if someone, for example, in that office left and was making $60,000 a year, the new person can only be hired at the rate where they schedule on the salary schedules. That may be 45, that may be 50, maybe whatever that number is. So there's not the money in the individual offices like there was before. On the training and the ICLE training, what we found is that there is a lot of criminal defense training out there. And what we have looked specifically at is what is the most benefit to public defenders, because although the private criminal bar has excellent training through the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, there's a different focus for a private criminal practitioner than for a public defender. And so although the law may be similar, some of the practices and the way to approach things when you're coming at it with more clients than just kind of the way a normal practitioner would approach things. As a result, we've tried to both create content specifically for our folks by our own folks, but also find monetary savings in that, because even ICLE, GACTL, the other groups that are out there, the cost for a CLE hour is a lot higher. And so we've tried to find ways to bring that down, whether through webinars over the years with our folks. We've had experts that are willing to devote their time to training our lawyers, other people from our capital defender unit or from our appellate division who are real specialists who can also do training. So we've tried to find efficiencies within the agency to bring the cost as low as we possibly can for those CLE hours.
I think that's a real good point from the chair lady. Ms. Rayford, if you could, it would be helpful if you would just take some of those ICLE courses and compute, if you will, the number of hours and the number of people you'd have to send to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that may help us understand and help relate back to our folks that, you know, what that cost is. If it's a real savings, then we'll mm-hmm. see it. If it's not, we'll know. I can appreciate that as a functional state law firm, if you will, mm-hmm. for criminal defendants, that there's a need to have internal structures and training and methodologies and forms and things that as a law firm you all feel comfortable utilizing, and that your techniques and the strategies and the implementation of that would be unique or to the public defenders. But I also think that there is, it's worth looking at for the moment what that comparative cost would be, both internally in hiring someone and paying fringe benefits and having that ongoing cost to the taxpayers versus hiring it out essentially through GACTL or ICLEs. So I think it's a good point. But yes. I think you can. But it's an easy math problem to me
definitely.
that I think can be worked out. It just takes some sharpening the pencil. So, and I think that's helpful, and that gives us some factual information that would be helpful to the committee.
Definitely.
Okay.
And then we'll also try to factor in, Mr. Chairman, with that, some of the accountability pieces that go with it as well, to make sure that we disparate people and access across the state because of the travel costs that would be involved in those things. So we'll try to factor all that in so we have a real good comparator of those items for you.
And there may be, and you may find, and I suspect you will find, that there are not courses that are going to be taught on accountability courts. So there may be some practice areas that are particular. But I think it's a good point from the chair lady. I appreciate that. Any other questions from members of the committee? I was just looking down the row here, but thank you, Mr. Executive. Yes.
Sorry.
About the accountability court supplement, the 39 is the benefits included on top of the 24. So we will have to reduce 12,000 plus benefits, and that's the amount we need.
And you'll get that. You'll get that number to court.
Yeah, I'll get that. Yes.
Correct.
I apologize.
No, that's good. Thank you for clarifying before we departed. Thank you, Mr. Executive Director, and we appreciate both of you being here today. Terry, good to see you as well. Thank you for being here. I was just looking across the board here, and I knew we had a powerhouse committee here, but I look down here and I see all the chairmen of the various committees here and the floor leader for the governor on this committee, and the chairman of Liberty County. No, the chairman of Liberty County is right here. So.
Can I introduce y'all to my chauffeur over here?
Yeah, I know the truth.
No. But but I just, I was looking down the line here, and I want to express my sincere appreciation to all of you being here. As leaders in the House, I appreciate you being here very much, taking the time to be a part of this committee. The knowledge that this group has is pretty impressive, from judges to some of the best legal minds in the state, to folks that have had tremendous public safety and law enforcement background and experience in terms of governance. It's very impressive. And the one individual that lobbies harder and fights most definitely for Southeast Georgia and Liberty County, Mr. Williams. So we've got a great team here, and I just wanted to make sure I acknowledge that I was just impressed by the folks that we have here. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr.
So we'll roll on to our next one. We have the Department of Law. Our new Attorney General, Chris Carr, is here, I believe, or he will be here, I'm sure. AG Carr is joining us. Thank you for being here. We are so pleased with the governor's selection.
Well, thank you. I am too. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We are happy to see you here, and this will be the first time we get to talk with you about the budget for the 18 budget. And so we have scheduled for you about 10 minutes of time, and so we'll let you roll through the requests. Are not that many, so I'll let you roll through those requests.
Okay. We just have to, Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you all very much for this. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you, and appreciate your support in the past for the department. Just two items that I wanted to call to your attention. And I believe you have the document, that kind of the spreadsheet. Is that correct? Y'all have that? Track sheet. Okay, good. The two requests that I wanted to highlight to you is you were very kind. The governor put in his budget last year a request for an honors fellowship program. And you had agreed to 3 last year. We have asked for 3 more. And let me tell you the importance of that. That's one of the priorities for me. Obviously, one of the things that had come to my attention as I came to the department is recruitment and retention. And how do we get good young lawyers? How do we get lawyers across all spectrums that want to come to work for the department and work in public service? And we think it's a great place to work, but we're trying to focus on ways that we can identify good young lawyers coming into the department, and this fellowship program will allow them to come in for 2 years. And what we're doing is we are targeting the 4 law schools in UGA and Mercer and Georgia State and Emory. We're also targeting Georgians who have gone out of state to law school, doing clerkships as well, to come in to spend 2 years. And one of the benefits of coming into the law department is you'll be able to get into the courtroom and get some great experience. We want folks to stay. We're hoping that they see for this couple-year experience that they get to do some high-quality work and be a part of what we're doing. So the fellows we had last year, just so you know, of the 3, 2 were from UGA and 1 went to Duke Law School but is from Macon. One of the fellows clerked for a federal judge for 2 years before starting her fellowship. And they've been involved in drafting briefs and pleadings, helping with arguments, and it's been a very positive experience. But we've got 3. We've got a reminder: we have 6 departments and 3 special units, and we only have 3 fellows. So this would allow us to expand to 6 total. And we think it provides real value, not just to the department, but to the state. But I think focusing on recruitment and retention is something that I'm going to continue to do during my time at the department. So that's the first one. The second one is in our new Solicitor General's unit. It's the newer unit that we had. It was created, I believe, in 2011, and appreciated your support. Again, what the SG's unit's trying to do is to make sure that we are organizing and we are coordinating all of our appellate work, making sure the state is arguing consistently across all platforms, also being involved in any multi-state actions that we're involved in. We currently have a Solicitor General and 2 deputies, but no administrative or paralegal support. They're handling high-profile and complex cases and have had no assistance really to site check briefs, prepare court filings, prepare materials, that sort of thing. And so the assistance of that position would be critical, and we would ask that you would look favorably on both of those requests. I'll mention that we had made a request of some yearly funds for e-discovery. After talking with OPB, we feel that we can handle that with the funds that we have, so we had withdrawn that request and wanted to focus on the first 2 that I had mentioned. And Mr. Chair, unless you want me to go any other detail of that, I'd be happy to take questions or any further conversation that you have.
I have a few questions, and so do members of the committee. Mr. AG, we have I've looked at some of the information that your team has provided to us, including the caseload. There are the Solicitor General's office or unit is having to oversee all appellate litigation in the state Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. Also with the U.S. Supreme Court, involving cases pending with the Affordable Care Act, executive orders on immigration, and environmental issues as well, the Florida-Georgia water wars litigation. There are other major federal cases that the SGs are having to oversee, not to mention other state regulatory and energy regulation issues that they're overseeing. This is and these are federal suits. Many of them, some of them were headed to the U.S. Supreme Court potentially. There are 55 briefs, I think, that y'all filed, that this unit has filed.
That's correct.
I'm impressed for one thing, but
thank you.
This is But at the same time, I am concerned that we have so many high-profile cases that are being handled by a team of 3.
Sure.
These must be the cream of the crop, and I believe that they are. But I'm just having a hard time understanding
Sure.
how 3 attorneys are managing these cases and the oversight of it. So that gives me concern.
Sure.
And then the other part of this is I understand the request for the paralegal. It seems reasonable to me that you're requesting that. But could you just explain to the committee a little bit more about those functions for the SG's
Absolutely.
unit and talk about these cases and how we're overseeing them?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the chance to talk about that. I think there's a couple things. Number one, the unit has done an outstanding job individually, but also has had the support of the Chief Deputy, of the Attorney General, of the others in the office. The way that I see the SG unit going forward is twofold. One is I want them to coordinate and communicate and, quite frankly, play quarterback. There is some great expertise in the department. I believe it's incumbent upon us is how do we put the best argument forward for the state of Georgia? That may be that somebody in the SG unit writes the brief or makes the argument, but it may also be in coordination with the chief deputy and the division director and the lawyer who had taken the case to begin with. Who is the best lawyer in the department? But to make sure that we're making the right argument. So it is a strategic role as much as because you're right, there's only 3 people in that unit. Mm-hmm. Over time, could they use more? I'm certain that they could. However, I think it's important. We have such great lawyers at the department that are experts in the area, whether it's criminal law, whether it's regulated industry, you name it. So I think that most importantly, as to which I believe is the SG unit's top priority, is making sure that we handle the appellate work. That is to play a coordinating function, number one. Number two, on the issues that rise to the U.S. Supreme Court, there are a few that we have right now. Some are amicus briefs, some are actions at a certain level, some at the merit stage. And we're managing those, I think, well through the unit as well as through the lawyers that may have handled that at the beginning. But something to continue to monitor, I would agree. As it relates to the ACA, Waters of the U.S., some of the other issues that come up, oftentimes those are cases that other states have taken the lead on that we're joining an amicus brief or that we're writing a letter or that we're involving ourselves in some other way. So also a coordinating function more than anything else. But in part, we can't take the lead on a lot of those because we don't have the personnel at this particular point to do a lot of that. Now we've got one that we'll be handling going forward, but I think, Mr. Chairman, that's a very fair observation. But I think if we do our job appropriately, it's really a coordinating function around the department because there are some very experienced lawyers. We just need to make sure the state's making the best argument based on personnel and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Number 25, is that Chairman Willard?
General Card, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you, too. I want to ask you more about the fellowship program. This has been something you started, a year ago, or the department started a year ago?
That's correct. So the first year was
July 1st?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And you had 3 the first year?
That's correct. We currently have 3.
How long does the fellowship program last?
2 years. So you commit to 2 years, and then our hope, though, is that you will want to stay in the department and be hired as a full-time employee.
So we have 3 now, and you want to expand it to how many?
3 more. So it'd be
3
6
more.
total.
Total 6.
Yes, sir.
And basically, this is to be sort of a breeding ground for future attorneys for the AG's office.
That's right. And one of the things I'm going to do, and I haven't had a chance to yet, but I do want to personally talk with the deans of the law schools and say, hey, look, this is something we really would ask you guys to also be a personally involved in. Let's identify folks that you think would want to get into public service. And Mr. Chairman, what it is, we know we're competing against firms that pay a lot of money. And clerkships that will be a great opportunity either at the judiciary level, even DOJ. But we think we provide an opportunity for lawyers to get into the courtroom early.
And this is a salary, that's payment part of it. How much salary do you pay a fellow on the program?
$60,000.
$60 a year.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Is it gonna be a permanent program? Is what you're looking at doing?
That's what we'd like to make it a permanent program. And again, we think this is a good way to recruit some good folks.
So hold on there now. I hope we will see. I think these are really good questions, and I hope that we'll see from this first crop that I want to, and I think that's where the chairman's going, is see what the retention ultimately is.
That's what I wonder how long it's
Yeah,
been going.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Thank
very
you.
fair. Yes, sir.
All right.
My question was answered, thank you.
So now, so we're thinking about this long term on the going back to the positions that Chairman Willard and brought up, as those matriculate and hopefully become employees. You'll be asking for then positions, full-time positions, all the benefits that go along with that for those positions.
That's correct.
Let's move forward. Okay.
That's correct.
And then, and I'm also presuming that you have an evaluation process as to the fellowship is there for the 2 years, and then after 2 years, I assume there'll be an invitation for those to stay who qualify to stay, as opposed to just attract to make your way into the AG's office.
Not to matriculate into a guaranteed position, no, sir.
Okay.
And it will be, and it also will be based on positions that are available and whether the individuals want to join that particular division and that sort of thing. So yes, that would be a coordinated decision that we would make.
Okay. And then also, just as a follow-up on one other thing.
Yes, sir.
I know that you and I are talking, and we'll continue to talk, because the committee has had some interest in the caseload management and and this pertains to House Bill 140. So House Bill 140 is the legislation that you and I talked about. So that came out of some study committee work that this committee has done. So we'll just kind of keep talking about that and move that forward. But the point of that is to look at the SAG process. We are getting requests from SAGs for increased fees.
Right.
And so we need to have some level of accountability with respect to the payment of those fees. That way we can show that we're being fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' dollars. I know that you are sensitive to that, so we'll continue that discussion.
Yes, sir.
The committee members are aware of it.
Mr. Chairman, can I give you a brief update on that?
Sure.
So 3 things that we've done and that we're going to continue to do, and I appreciate your interest and continued conversation on this. We've reached out to the National Association of Attorneys General to see how other offices are doing it, number 1. Number 2, we are internally, again, coming up with a better way to communicate to you how we are doing that process, because it is certainly something that we do. And the third thing I think we need to do as well is to talk to our agency clients and say, what are some of the metrics that you're wanting to do to evaluate and have used to evaluate SAG? So we're going to continue that conversation. I appreciate very much your involvement in that.
Well, I appreciate your diligence.
Yes, sir.
And openness to it. It's good to have fresh faces with a fresh look. So we appreciate that very much.
Thank you, sir.
Terry, go ahead.
Mr. Attorney General, I don't know, it's just a personal question, I guess, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but coming from the department as Commissioner, Department of Economic Development, I would imagine it's a little bit of a transition or whatever, but have you found some things that you've learned in the Department of Economic Development, considering our success over there, that you're bringing to the Attorney General's office?
I think that's a great question, and yes, I mean, how do the laws that we pass and that we're charged with enforcing have a real impact on people? How does it have a real impact on companies? How does it have a real impact on Georgia? And one of the things I've said that I think, and I appreciate the governor, having his confidence in me, we want to make sure that we provide excellence in everything that we do, whether it's work product, customer service, communication, and I hope that I bring a little bit of common sense to it as well. I mean, because again, one of the things I think that we did well, and with the General Assembly's help, is we collaborated. We coordinated on projects. We problem solved together, and hopefully I'll bring that as well. And I know I'm very respectful of everybody staying in their lane. I'm respectful of the legislative branch and the executive and the judiciary. But where we can work to make a difference, I want to keep trying to do that.
Well, thank you. One of the things I think has been so successful at the Department of Economic Development, and we've seen the results over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, is the sort of thinking outside the box and proactive, and I'm sure you'll bring that too. So
That's I definitely think big.
Yeah, and your responsibilities as AG is tremendous in terms of the representation of the state. And so every taxpayer in this state is indirectly depending on your office to fight the legal battles that need to be fought and to give good, sound advice to the agencies which operate many of the all the state programs. And so it is no small appointment that you're holding, and already I can tell from the interactions that I've had that the collaborative spirit that you had with economic development is here and present in your office, and we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
And I also see you brought your deputy director, Mr. Dunn, is behind you, and Mr. Johnson's behind you, and Ms. Bentley is with you, right?
And Mr. Chair, you saw it takes 3 to keep me out of trouble, right?
You notice no one else is had to say anything, right?
Yeah, but these are all heavy hitters, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay. We thank you for your time, Mr. General. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Appreciate it.
All right, next up is Public Safety, Department of Public Safety. We look forward to hearing from Colonel Mark McDonough, our Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety.
Is there a lawyer that left a telephone at the table? Mr. Rao, we're neither lawyers or chairmen. It's good to see you, sir. Yeah. Oh, no, sir. No, sir.
And Al bleeds blue, so that's good.
That's it. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would have you refer to page 14. There are 2 items that we'd like to point out to you. The first is 39.4.7, increased funds for technology upgrades of $416,000. Now, to be up front with you right away, this will be the first of 2 installments that are requested. What this is in relation to is the governor did an executive order on cybersecurity and the security of the networks that we use within state government. That was a collaborative between GTA and GMA Homeland Security. And as that, we rose our hand and said, we'll be one of the guinea pigs to have you take a look at our organization, and they identified some areas where we needed help. So we did a white paper and submitted that to OPB, and there was an option 2 in there that over a 2-year period of time, we would have the Georgia Technology Authority come in and take over the security of our network. Calvin Rhodes has done an excellent job with GTA. The GTA of today is not the GTA of 8 years ago. If you have seen what they have done in network security and the equipment that they have put a lot of money in the infrastructure, we feel very comfortable with them taking over that role. We have 9 communication centers, 52 posts, 19 way stations. And what's important is the material that we use on a daily basis comes from NCIC and GCIC with criminal records and background information on folks, so you can see that the security of our network is an important thing. So I give you forewarning that this is the first of a 2-year request in a phase 1 and phase 2 option. It's just not something that can be done statewide for all of our agency in a year's time. The work will have to be spread over 2 years. The second is 39.4.8. It is consistently the same thing that we've asked for over the past 5 years, is a yes to use any existing funds to replace the folks that we've lost. So this is attrition money. You've heard me talk about the 116 folks we lost last year, and we are in a very robust recruiting effort. We have 3 trooper schools planned for this fiscal year. So we are asking you to continue to say yes for us to use those funds to run trooper school and to replace and increase our folks from our attrition.
And Colonel, just so the committee is aware, I'm sure they are aware, but to repeat it, the staffing that you are allotted right now, you currently have how many vacancies for troopers?
Interesting question, Mr. Chairman. Over the years, you've probably heard the figures 953 or 989, but the fact of the matter is our budget drives essentially the money we have to hire folks. So the existing budget that you have in a zero baseline type issue, we essentially have the ability to hire about 862 folks. Right now, we are at 780. And so we've had some trooper schools that are graduating that are in, but in order to get us back to that number, that's the reason why we have 3 schools planned for this year.
Well, I know that the director of Dipstick works really hard on training those folks. I saw a young man ring the bell. I say young man, he's probably my age, but he went through the whole training, and the class, I think, had 50 in it, but it was winnowed down to maybe 22, 24, somewhere in that range.
We actually run our own training academy.
Okay.
But the training center is an excellent partner with us. They are extremely flexible with the use of facilities when we're able to run schools. We run sometimes greater than a 50% attrition rate in our schools. And so I'll give a for instance for the school that's about to graduate. We started 22 and we now have 7. Mm-hmm. So we are in the throes of the snowflake generation. And we had one person leave that school because
they melt away.
He didn't want to conform to the haircut standards. Okay, so I mean, this is the type of thing that we're dealing with, and we discipline our folks, you know, and we don't apologize for it because we have to have disciplined folks for what they do.
All right. Well, our chairman from Liberty County's got some questions now.
Yes, sir.
About snowflakes. I don't think he's seen them down there. He doesn't see them in Liberty County, so.
Colonel, good to see both of you. It just occurred to me he didn't want to conform to the haircut standards. I hope you all were not the standards.
Actually, you are looking at the standard. Yeah. As cadets, one of the first things that traditionally happens in training is the removal of that personal pride, Mr. Al, and we don't give them hair product. So, yeah, we have very strict standards, very close haircuts in our trooper school.
Rogaine is clearly not issued.
No. We don't ask for what we don't need.
That's right. That's right. Major Johnson, it's good to see you here today as well. Other questions for the colonel or the major?
Those silver. It's Lieutenant Colonel.
Is it Lieutenant Colonel?
Lieutenant Colonel, sir, is silver. Gold gold is 04, a major, and then the silver is 05, Lieutenant Colonel.
Fort Stewart.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for the correction. All right. Well, other questions? Good. All right. Well, we appreciate you, Colonel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Got it. All right. So next up on our agenda is the Peace Officer Standards Training Council. Ken Vance is our executive director. We welcome him to come and speak to us. As far as time going, we're getting right back on schedule, so
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I appreciate this opportunity. Ours is 39. Take off my glasses so I can read. 39.8. I'm really only going to talk about 3 things, and that's the handout that you're receiving. I sent the chairman something earlier this week, I think, and I hope you got it, Chairman Welch. First, I'd like to talk about 39.8.6. This is to allow us a fund increase to hire 2 additional investigators at a cost of $189,393. Currently, ladies and gentlemen, we have 9 investigators for the state of Georgia. There are some 59,000 peace officers in the state. If you'll read down a little bit, our average case completion time is 368 days. That is unacceptable to me. I think it needs to be in the 6 to 7 month range. And but if you'll look a little farther down on that page, we have we average opening 1,400 cases a year, and this year is expected to be right at that 1,400 figure. and we have over 1,700 open cases in the field. These are cases on peace officers either violating departmental rules, or in most cases, in 63 or 4% of the time, are charged with criminal violations. Our goal has been to keep good people, good professional people that are upstanding in law enforcement and in the peace officer profession. And when I got here, I'll just give you a little history lesson. In 2007, when I got here, we thought we were getting about 49% reporting of what was going on in Georgia. Now we think, well, we kind of know we're at about 73 to 75%. That's good and bad. The good is they're reporting, as they are required to by law, even though some still don't understand that law and don't report. But of those that do, we do our best to do a fair and impartial investigation, put that investigation in front of the post council. Michael Nail, who was here earlier, is the chairman of the committee that sees those cases first. So we need more help to reduce the 368-day period of time between a case coming to us and a case going through the full council. And that does not include the due process rights that those people have upon the decision of the post council. That's that one. Excuse my voice. 39.8.7 is provide a contract to standardized mandate testing at all academies in the state. Now, let me say something here. Chris Wigington, who's following me, and I work very closely together. This particular request, along with the one that follows it, this is something we've talked about and we're striving for, to get a task analysis done, which should be done. The national standard is every 5 years. To be honest with you, it's been some 10 years since we had the last task analysis in Georgia. So we've been working with Carl Vincent, even though we have not let a contract yet, because, to be honest with you, we don't have the money for them to do a task analysis, help us do a task analysis for the law enforcement basic mandate. You're familiar with the governor's task force that he appointed in the fall, the law enforcement task force, to address the training that goes on in basic mandate. Mr. Wigington and I are both on that committee, and we should be forming up next week, is my understanding, and we'll go from there. In light of that, I'm asking for one of what Mr. Wigington is going to ask for two of, and that's a curriculum specialist position. That's 39.8.8 at $82,194. The titles are the same, ladies and gentlemen, but what they do is completely different. Our curriculum specialist will be to formulate curriculum on the front end of that training process, to make sure that we have the right questions asked, test questions asked, and so forth, in order for us to get done what we need to get done. I'm not going to try to take over Mr. Chris's explanation, but he's really on the other end, and that's developing the training and giving out the training that will be done for the basic mandate class. So those are my three requests. I know in the amended budget, if it passes the state, y'all have already given me the vehicles to put these two investigators in. I'd just like the people to put in them. I'll be glad to entertain any questions, Mr. Chairman of the committee.
All right, I have a few. Go ahead, Chairman Willard. Go ahead.
Mr. Vance, good to meet you. I've never had a chance to say hello to you.
Well, thank you.
And I'm curious about the backlog you're talking about and the causing of that. And I say this since I'm a attorney for a local government, and I know in our case the police department does really most of, I thought, the preparation of things. We have also doing something outside the boundaries of the law or the the standards of the academy, state, they really prepared. Is there something missing?
Yes, sir.
Not
It's
understanding.
waiting on the case to get through court. It makes our job much easier to make a recommendation to the full council in that case with that officer that has done something wrong, to get through the court process and then get it in front of council. We only meet 4 times a year, so we have certain windows that we have to meet. But the big log jam, sir, is getting those cases through court. Somebody might get charged with a DUI, and it'll be 6 months before they go to court.
Right, so the backlog comes not as a result in your department, it comes as a result in the local department itself where they're disciplining that officer because of his conduct, and it may be a court proceeding going on as a result of that. So you can't do anything until that's resolved.
That's correct. And what we have to do is check with that court, those courts, about every 2 to 3 weeks to see if that case has gone through, because they don't have an automatic reporting back to us once they've heard that case.
Okay. Other than the fact that the courts themselves maybe cause the backlog, is there anything within your office that's causing this backlog?
Yes, sir.
What's that?
We don't have enough people to do them.
Enough to do what now? Tell me.
To investigate these cases, gather that paperwork, interview witnesses, and bring those findings back to us.
Okay, so I guess I'm missing something again. I thought most of this fact gathering, documentation, et cetera, was done really through a local either sheriff's office or police department.
Yes, but in many cases, that person has the right to request an interview with our investigator.
Right.
And many of them are taking advantage of that. Okay. And that takes time. We go out and interview them, and we put that all in one file, and at the end summarize it for the council to make their decision.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Judge Caldwell. Chairman Caldwell.
Director, you're asking for 2 investigators. What are you going to pay these people?
With the new funding that was just put into effect, they will start out making $56,000 a year. Now, before you jump, these folks have got to
I didn't jump nowhere.
Well, I know, I didn't want you to. I know that's a lot of money. But our people have to have at least 10 years of experience before we'll even consider them hiring them. And most of our people, on the average, have 19 years of experience or better.
So this 189,393 figure, that includes benefits and everything? So just 2 would be this figure?
Correct.
Okay.
And following up on those questions there, so the need for the investigators is for separating and setting aside whatever criminal action is being brought against the law enforcement agent. There's an internal investigation or post-investigation for violations of the post-training standards.
Post-act, yes, sir.
So you're under the post-act, so you're actually doing that investigation either parallel with the criminal action, or why do you have to wait on the criminal action to complete its? If there's been violations of guidelines, or are you just doing that in order to just explain why there's not a parallel?
Short answer, it makes our case more solid if there's a conviction. There are some cases where post looks at the action of the officer that got him arrested to start with, without regard to conviction. That's the way the law reads, or the act reads. To be honest with you, the criminal cases don't take the most of our time. We do go and visit with internal affairs investigators like we have up in your area where you're the attorney, Mr. Willard, and make sure that we know sometimes there's a little more the rest of the story than there is just in the paperwork. The cases that take us the most time are those violations of departmental policy, which we have to consider as well. A case of someone forging medical documents in order to lay out of work. We had cases this past year where we had people that were taking tests, entrance exams, and formulating entrance exams for people trying to get into, say, the Department of Corrections and into the private correctional facilities. We've arrested about 9 people in the last 6 months just in that particular area alone. We have to go and take warrants and go and do those kind of things, just as an investigator is supposed to do. So most of our cases, the time-wise are in those departmental violations. The criminal cases, yes, we could go just on the arrest alone and the evidence put forth, but sometimes you take an investigation that has to do with, say, a domestic violence where they chose, when it comes time for court, to not show up for court, and the case is dismissed. Well, then yes, we've got a good amount of material, but we still have to gather some more material to look at the actions that got that person there, as opposed to just looking at the conviction.
You're asking for the funds for a curriculum specialist in line 39.8.8.
Yes, sir.
Who does that now? Who does the curriculum?
We don't have one, sir.
So who prepares the curriculum for post-training?
We hadn't prepared one, sir. We go with the one that we've got now. Back in the late.
How old is that one?
About 10 years.
10 years old.
Yes, sir.
Is this the curriculum specialist, would this be a one-time offering so that you could deploy them for a specific period of time to create and update the curriculum?
Sir, I think you just answered that. It would be an ongoing thing. You know, laws change, rules change, practices change. And the way we teach our officers, particularly in the 21st century, needs to change and be dynamic as well. So that position would be ongoing, sir.
So how are you training individuals then now on changed rules and laws over the past 10 years?
What we've done is we've partnered with the Public Safety Training Center folks to sit down and look. We've asked the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police, the Sheriff's Association, what they needed. We made, you know, minor tweaks through the years, but for a wholesale change of what's coming and to stay current, this is why we are asking for this position, of which we used to have 5 or 6 of.
Director Vance, can you tell me what allocation, if any, has been made from the Peace Officers, Prosecutors, and Indigent Defense Fund Act, from the pot of money that's supposed to be collected from the constitutional dedication fees for training of law enforcement? How much of that has been going towards executive training for chiefs of police?
Sir, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
That's not something that comes through us.
Okay. All right. So is there, and to what degree does POST provide law enforcement executive training, if any?
What we do is we certify the training that's offered. The Sheriff's Association and the Georgia Chiefs put forth training, and they ask us to either bless it or not bless it. And if it meets the criterion that we've already established, we do bless it.
Okay.
About 90% of the time, sir.
I got you. Okay. Other questions? All right.
Thank y'all so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vance. We appreciate you coming. We have one more on our agenda here. Sorry, two more. We have that's right, Training Center. At 4:30, are we at 4:30? What time do we have now? Yeah, 4:34. Okay, so we're moving right along. Chris Wigington is Director of the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. He is here today to present the request of the budget for 2018. If you would, Director, go ahead and fire away. We're going to be dealing with Section 39 of your track sheet.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, other board members. I'm going to skip the statewide changes unless there's any questions about those and move on to some of the requests. The first request is 39.9.6 on your track sheet. This request is for funding to hire 10 public safety training instructors for our basic training division. Currently, the basic training division has not seen an increase in staff since 1970. In 1970, when this course was created, it was a 3-week course. It is currently an 11-week course, and it was limited to the number of students who could be enrolled into that class. We've got 6 regional academies and 2 satellites during this course of instruction. Currently, all 8 are being taught at. 2 of those, our Savannah location has 84 students in it, and our Forsyth location has 72 students. So that is the request for 39.9.6. Do you want me to continue or ask if there's questions at each one? Okay. Next request is 39.9.7. This is the request for 2 curriculum developer positions. I've been in this position now for 3 years, and I don't think there's any educational facility or training facility in the state does not have some type of curriculum developers. This responsibility has fell on the backs of the instructors at the training center, and we had curriculum when I got there that had not been updated in quite some time, to be honest with you. It's out of date. We have since put that curriculum on a yearly rotation where so many courses will be updated each month, and it will go on a yearly rotation. And that decreases the demand for the updates. These curriculum specialists, their job will be developing the curriculum, looking at the curriculum, and making sure we're keeping that curriculum up to date and allowing the instructors to do what they were hired to do, which is deliver material in classes and reduce some of our backlog. The next request is 39.9.8. That is for system upgrade and software with our online program. If you'll notice in the handout we provided, in 2015, our online student population was 65,873. In 1 year, that enrollment rose to 93,756. We just released 4 additional courses that were part of the governor's initiative, so those numbers will substantially rise this year and increase the demand on our server and our system that we have current in place. The next request is 39.9.9. That is for 12 positions for the crisis intervention training that is transferring from the GBI to the training center. Currently, there is 1 person assigned to that program. This is part of the governor's initiative that he wants to take as a statewide training program. It covers de-escalation and recognizing mental health issues as police officers and first responders deal with these people when they encounter them. That is my request, and I would open it up to any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Director. I have a question from Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question. You mentioned on 39.9.9 that was going to be a transfer from GBI, and those were 12 crisis intervention training. You currently had 1. How many positions are going to be rolling from the GBI?
Just 1.
Just 1. Oh,
yes.
Okay.
So she is on detachment, so she actually will maintain her position with the GBI. Director Ken has detached her to our agency. She's set to retire in 2 years.
Okay.
And I feel like it'll take probably 2 years to get this problem up and running.
Okay. I was just wondering because, the transfer, if there were any, but if it's just 1, okay.
Yes, it's just 1.
Good question. And then going back to the curriculum, you've been managing this on a rolling basis, and I assume you're having your the training personnel do this work over the last several years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And they'll still be involved in the process because they are the subject matter experts. But there's a lot of time spent behind the scenes that they could be delivering material where these curriculum specialists could be doing it behind the scenes.
Where are the satellite academies? I know you mentioned one at Savannah.
Well, the satellites are located in Rome and Columbia County.
Okay. And you're going to have, the way I have it listed in the track sheet is increased funds for 10 public safety training instructor positions for 6 satellite academies. So I was trying to make sure I understood where those 6 were.
Well, we've got 6 primary academies and 2 satellite academies. Okay. So we've got an academy in Savannah,
yes, sir.
Tifton, Columbus, Forsyth, Cherokee County, and Athens. So those are the permanent locations. Gotcha. And then the 2 satellite is Rome and Columbia County.
Okay, so these public safety training instructors are going to be part of the 6 main facilities, or are they going to be?
They will be part of the main facilities. Right now, the 2 satellite academies only run classes as needed. Okay. So we take, say for instance, Cherokee. Rome is a satellite for Cherokee, and Columbia is a satellite for Athens. Okay. So we detach staff from those academies to go and teach those classes when needed.
So I think we need to make a language change there from satellite to primary academies.
Yes, sir. That is correct, primary.
And then, so if you take out the online, we're going to be adding online instructions. Can you explain why then we need to add instructors in satellite facilities. Why couldn't we teach them online? And I know there's a good explanation for why. I just want to make sure we have
Yes,
that
sir.
explanation.
I understand that. The 10 positions will be at the 6 satellite, which covers the majority of basic training, which is delivered in person. It's the introductory training, like any basic training program from the military to law enforcement throughout the country. So it is delivered in a face-to-face capacity. A lot of the online training we deliver is either in 1 hour up to 8 hour blocks. A lot of that is legal updates or refreshers, that type of training where the student is still, or the officer is still at their agency. So if they've got an in-car computer, they can do that training or refresher while on duty at their agency. So that cuts down on manpower as far as for us and the agency sending them to Forsyth for that type of training.
And is there a duplication? We heard from Colonel McDonough that State Patrol was training their own personnel using your facilities.
They do.
Okay, so is there a duplication in our training services in that we should have one group training and training across the board? Or are we duplicating those services, those training services, by having the GIPSIC training staff in addition to the Georgia State Patrol training staff? And I know Colonel McDonough's out there, so I'm watching for him to come rushing through the door.
No, there's not a duplication of service. That's 2 totally different programs. I've actually been through both as a police officer and as trooper, and I can tell you there's a distinct different set of rules and guidelines when you
get to have more hair, I see. That's
I do. This is actually where'd the colonel go? yeah. This is a more standard haircut. But it is not a duplication of service. We service the majority of all agencies in the state for basic training, including the GBI and DNR, and then they go back and do a agency-specific training outside of our basic. The patrol is the only state agency that takes their personnel from start to finish.
Okay.
But it is not a duplication of service.
All right, Chairman Willard.
Thank you. I'm sort of going down the same rabbit hole. I'm going to show my ignorance.
Yes, sir.
What's the difference what you do and what Post does? I mean, Post I thought was the training agency for the...
Yeah, Post, they set standards and approve standards.
Okay.
The question you asked earlier, somebody asked about the curriculum, who had been designing that curriculum. I can tell you it's been our staff.
Okay.
We submit the curriculum up to that point. They approve it for post credit.
Yes, sir.
So they don't deliver any training. They just approve and
They
set
don't.
the standard.
So the term training in there is not really appropriate. Maybe.
I'll not comment on that one.
And y'all train police officers, sheriff's deputies?
Any public safety person in the state. So we
Okay.
actually train coroners, firefighters, first
Okay.
responders, 911 operators. If it's first responders in the state of Georgia, they come through our facility.
Okay. Didn't realize there was a difference.
I'd love to have you down for a tour.
It's a what?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I think that would be
I thought
actually
they did the
helpful.
training
I think
too
that,
there.
I know some members of the
Also
committee
going
have
down
seen
there.
that. We have a lot of new members to this committee. So I think we are going to try to
That's where he
come
is.
and visit, because I think that would be very helpful with the committee members to
Yes.
see the distinction, because that, I mean, you're bringing up very good points with firefighters and the first responders that you train there. The firefighting facilities, you've shown us those, and working those engines and the training that goes into actually going into facilities and the buildings and the equipment that you have to wear. I think it's very helpful to understand that distinction between what State Patrol does and then all the other first responder services that you're providing. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, you actually beat me to the punch. I was just about to say that during my prison tour last summer. I went to GIPSIC. Quite
How long of a prison tour did you have?
I've been to 30 of the 35 state prisons. But part of that was going to GIPSIC, and I mean, just the active shooter, can't say building, village, and then the track and everything. Quite impressive, and yeah, I'm glad we need to go do that. Quite impressive.
Thank you.
Chairman from Liberty County.
Just quickly, what do you teach a coroner?
They actually go, from start to finish, to be honest with you. A coroner.
I
a
know
lot
the
of them-
finish part,
we
but
know the finish, yeah,
that's what we're aware of that.
Well, the proper way to tag the body, processing the paperwork, transferring the body to the crime lab. It's again, it's from start to finish, because a lot of the coroners are elected officials, but a lot of them throughout the state have no experience with anything to do. So it's more of it starts as a basic training program, as an introductory program, and then they come back a couple of times a year for in-service training and refresher training.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, other questions from members of the committee? All right, seeing none, then we appreciate your time here today. Chris, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming as well. And we'll follow up with you if we have any other questions, but I think we're going to move on to our Department of Defense. And we are honored to have our Adjutant General, Brigadier General Joe Gerard, and his staff here. He always has a very focused request, and I know the chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I will be quick and brief. So thanks for the opportunity. As a quick refresher for the committee, we have a federal budget of about $480 million, and that's met with a state budget that of $12 million. And our economic impact on the state for the last year was $858 million for 2016. So regarding the current budget, I won't go into the statewide changes unless anybody has any questions, but I'll direct your attention to page 33. I think it's 20.3.5, which is the 257,000 to our YCA Youth Challenge Academy for pay increases. So the whole purpose behind this is we have done some analysis and our turnover at our Youth Challenge Academies, and we just opened a third campus in Milledgeville in October, and very proud of that campus. But of our, I think it's 634 state employees that we have, only all of them except we've got about 14 of those that are completely funded with state funds. The Delta, all the rest have some type of match. It may be 25 state, 75 federal, maybe 50 state, 50 federal, that type thing. So only 14 of our state employees are solely funded on state funds. And our YCA is primarily 25% state, 75% federal. And we, although they account for, our YCA employees account for 44% of our Georgia state positions, they account for 70% of our turnover. And so that turnover, it just compounds our problem. We're spending more money hiring and firing and doing paperwork processing than we are teaching students discipline and educating them to the standards we would like. So, and then the other point that I would make is that $424,000 will be met with a federal match of $1.27 million. So it will bring additional funds to the state. So with that, I'll stop and ask for any questions if anybody has any.
Yes, sir. Brigadier General, the money that's brought down in the Fed match, so is that the federal dollars, is that also being there to, is that there to supplement the salaries as well, or is that
it's all for salaries.
All salaries.
Every bit of it's for salaries.
So we're looking at about $1.6.5 million that's going to go to
That's correct.
Enhance salaries.
That's correct.
Can you explain a little bit about what is the percentage increase that you're going to see?
It'll be about a 17% increase. I will tell you that most of the state employees at the Youth Challenge Academy qualify for federal assistance, and just about all of them work additional jobs, either one or two additional jobs other than at our academy. So,
what is the base pay then?
Well, it's on a scale depending on what you do, but I mean there are some that are making $9 an hour, and and we run that academy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 22 weeks, and so that somebody spending the night with those cadets watching them, but the teachers are one thing, and so I will tell you that primarily just about all of our employees, they come to work and they're immediately looking for other work and just watching job announcements, et cetera, waiting on something better to pop up. And so just as an example, our cadre had a 23% turnover, our cooks had a 19% turnover, lead cooks had a 44% turnover, and our Fort Stewart manager position has a 33% turnover. So as you can see, it's just it's a fight to keep good employees, and that's the basis for this pay increase.
Would you mind, I'd like to have those numbers and keep those
Okay.
available so that we can better explain to other members
Be glad
here,
to.
today. That would be helpful. And then could you also give us kind of the salary scale from your lowest to the
Okay.
highest so we can see that
We'll provide that.
that compression. And our chairman from Liberty County, Al. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, General. Glad that you're asking this. Having watched the youth YCA program at Fort Stewart since its inception, I was always baffled how you could get anybody to work out there. 'Cause you've got some employees out there that just hung on over 10 years that are still at $9.50 an hour.
Yes, sir.
And in the initial stages of a new class, that's some heavy lifting. You've got folk really resisting, and
Yes,
there's a lot
sir.
of pushback, and it's admirable that they do. Now, what my question was, will that, they're part-timers also, but will that be across the board raise?
Yes, sir.
For everybody?
Yes, sir.
And with your cadre, if the vast majority of them were not military retirees, they couldn't work out
Oh,
there.
exactly. Yeah, and
They
that's
just
the
couldn't.
benefit. They're already drawing a
Yeah.
pension from
Yeah.
and
Well,
have
they-
if they've retired after 20 years in the military, they've got TRICARE and health care benefits, and so this is just helping that pension that they already have.
Yeah, I know a sergeant major that just was hired about 6 months ago, and he said he does it for the love. He said, because really I could stay home and catch work and make more money than
Yes,
you
sir.
pay out there. I think it's a great move.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. All right, just one last question on this, and then committee members, I wanted to ask Joe Rotondo to come up and speak on the chiefs of police. He's the executive director just after this. It won't take very long. Sorry, Frank. Sorry, Frank. Joe, sorry. So, so Frank, but Joe, going back to the question I had for you was that last year the Senate put in $50,000, I think, to buy some equipment for search and rescue. Have you bought the equipment? What's happened with that money?
That was, I'll get the specifics on what we spent that. We've got a spreadsheet that we spent that money on.
Okay.
I don't know if it's all been purchased at this time yet or not, but we do have a spreadsheet that of the items that we were going to purchase with that. So I'll have to get back to you on that one.
That'd be fine. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate it. Frank, if you'll step up real quick, I wanted to give Frank an opportunity to talk on behalf of the chiefs of police in terms of the executive police education and training. He had a special request, and I wanted to just give him 5 minutes to talk very briefly, because members need to run.
All right, thank you.
On that point.
Thank you.
Go
My
ahead.
name is Frank Vincent Rotondo, and I've been the executive director of the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police for over 20 years. So I'm sort of the historian, so to speak, in this room here. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Actually, Chairman Willett, to get back to a question you asked, Peace Officer Standards Training Council, that was the actual arm of government at one point in time, and then in the early 80s, it was the mid-80s, they put a public safety training center together, and that's when the training went over there. So they kept the name Peace Officer Standards Training Council. So that's the distinct difference between it. I was not here in the 80s, but needless to say, I had to follow it. Now, what we have, and you asked a question of Director Vance about the money. We have currently, which is what has always been referred to as a B budget line item, in Director Vance's budget. Director Vance doesn't directly administer it, but he has one of his subordinates, Nina, who is his budget person, administer it. Currently, we have in that money In that budgeted line item, let me just get you, $232,933. Now, what we do with that money basically is under the Post Act 35820 and 35820.1, we train police chiefs. A special training. It is different than basic law enforcement training. We do call it post-certified training. In other words, it also reacts as post-hours for police chief, but it's upper-level management training. That's what we try to center in on. We try to say it's upper-level management, but sometimes we have to deviate a little bit to go into supervision level. So one of the code sections deals with 60 hours of training that new police chiefs have to get when they become a police chief. The turnover rate is extremely high in police chiefs. When I started 20 years ago, it was about 100 a year. It's now averaging about 80, 85 a year, which is a good thing, which means they're keeping on to their chiefs a little bit longer. The highest turnover rate are in the smaller villages and smaller communities rather than smaller cities, not the larger cities like Atlanta or Dunwoody or Sandy Springs. Now, we have all different quality of police chiefs, so that becomes a little bit of a problem. So I have to deal with some that are really acting in the capacity of a police officer giving out tickets versus the real law enforcement managers. So when we have new chief schools, I always make sure that I give a pre-test and basically say 60 hours later you will get a post-test, because I believe in the quality of that material getting through to each person so that when they leave there, they understand the functions associated with their job. So we have things in our new chief schools, such as a lot of labor issues, because that's what they run into, a lot of upper-level supervision issues that they run into. And that class is 60 hours. We give it twice a year. We have an average of about 35 chiefs each class throughout the state. The second part of our program is to select, provide, or approve training for police chiefs, where they have to get their 20 hours of in-service training, their in-service hours like attorneys do, at the upper-level management phase, and they get that through us too. We usually do that in the form of 2 conferences, summer conference and a winter conference. Our winter conference is coming up this week. Usually it's in Atlanta, but it is in Athens this time around, and the summer conference is held in Savannah. We have the lion's share of the police chiefs going to the summer conference and the winter conference to get their hours of training. Now, here's where we're at. In 2004, the governor took the budgeted amount of money we had, which was $314,851. We had Governor Perdue was his first year, and I think he had a budget crunch that year. Or it may have been 2002 was his first year, but in 2004 he took that budget and he cut almost all budgets by 1/3. So he cut that about 1/3. That's how we got to the $232,933. If using my original figure of 2004 and saying that's the money we need to deliver the training, and, very important, to pay the meals and lodging per diem to the police chiefs who are in excess of 60 miles away from the training location, adequate money to offset their city's expense. Right now, with that budget cut, we're only able to pay $53 a day for meals and lodging. And with the 214, it was only 79. So as you could see, it got cut with the budget cut on that. So if you think about it now, $53 a day, no matter where we go, our meals and lodging is not very high. Now, maybe cities that are in good financial shape could afford that, but some of the small cities that need the training the most, the Fergusons of the future, they resist sending their police chiefs there. And my retort on that is to say, if you don't, they lose their post-certification. Because that's the way the law is written, and I adhere to it, and I believe it. And I believe the training is upper-level management training. So they regretfully do that, but the chief always gets a little backlash on that. So my request was for a certain amount of funding. It was hard to figure out what, because I don't know who's going to be that 60 miles away, who's going to come to the training. So with the closest estimate I could do on that, I gave those numbers to the chairman, and that's what really I was looking for. It's 102,619. But to be brutally fair to you, that would give us basically just reimbursement for us to reimburse the chiefs. But doing a cost of living inflation factor on a little nice calendar that they have, a little calculator, to replenish the original money we lost, which was 314,851, to current numbers, it went up 27.13%, meaning we would really need $400,000, $400,472 to be whole again, to where we could deliver the training, and it doesn't come out of the association's budget. That's what we're doing now. We're supplying it out of the association's budget. So how am I getting that money in the budget? I'm getting that money in my budget because I happen to have some very good people working in my office, and we do things like management audits for police agencies where we evaluate the department. We are doing overall promotional assessment centers for departments as private jobs. So we're taking our private association money and using it to offset the chief's training money. And then sometimes we have registration costs associated with that. But the bottom line is, I don't know if it's necessarily fair to do this to this segment, these people who are running the departments, to not give them the quality training. And I want to give them quality. To give them quality, I'm just looking at the training information we have set up for this year. We have racial intelligence, we have legal liability issues for managers, we have social medias and the impact on the department, we have cybercrime, an in-depth evaluation. You've heard about some of these issues, cultural competence, intelligent policing, under color of law, and a whole potpourri of other training programs earmarked for managers. So there's the distinct difference. And Chris Wickington and I have spoke about this many, many times. He has his hands full now. In fact, Chris is a head of a law enforcement agency. He is the head of the police at the Public Safety Training Center. He went through this school. So Wiggington went through the school, the colonel went through the school, Vernon Keenan had to go through the school. Anybody who's designated head of an agency, those people came with an advantage. They are very astute law enforcement leaders with good intelligence. I could tell you more and more, but I know you gave me 10 minutes. I think I already went over that. Maybe you gave me 5. And
Five.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
but
so
I'm a Yankee. Do you expect full truth?
So I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you making the request. I just want to make sure that the committee members heard what you're asking for. They needed to hear that. It doesn't, and I think that gives them some sense of what you're doing, what courses you're providing, and why that's important to the chiefs. And then this gives us a good sense of the shortfall in terms of reimbursement for the per diem. So, Frank, we really appreciate you being here. I want to keep our committees on schedule. We're running a little bit after time, so thank you for coming. Members, I appreciate you all being here today. We'll see you at the next meeting, which I think is on the 8th, so Wednesday week. And then we'll have another meeting planned on Wednesday week. Yes, sir, next week, Wednesday. And then we'll have a meeting on Thursday as well. So that will probably be a little bit of a long day because we're off Friday, so plan on sticking around.
What time is Thursday? Do you know the time?
I think it's 1:30. No, sorry, 2:45 on Thursday and 1:30 on Wednesday.
I sure wish that was in reverse, because everything.
I know.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.